Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cuccinelli, what happens when you take a laser and you point it into the eyes of a human being?
So the body has about a 0.2 second look away reaction. And one of the challenges, there are several, but one of the challenges is if you're not looking at the person assaulting you with the laser, you can't figure out who's performing the assault. So they're you know, you think of it practically, you're trying to shield your eye and still do your job. We've had a number of officers who had days-long blindness. So far, they've all kind of come back, if you will. But you also get what's called flash blindness. Think of it as the old Kodak cameras where you get that blue spot and you can't quite see your entire field of vision for a period of time.
I assume that for that moment, in addition to any long-term damage or short-term damage that it might do, for the time being, it also makes it more dangerous for the officer.
Absolutely.
As the officer recoils, as the officer steps away from the harm.
The way multiple people sometimes work together in the crowd, that is a clearly planned exercise.
And to be clear, a device like this one, which can be bought anywhere by anyone, doesn't run out of its supply, at least not in a single protest. They can shine that all night long if they want to.
All night
right?
long.
And it can still do its harm. It's one of the things that I find so intriguing about all this is how it is, even in 2020, as crazy as this year is, it seems doubly crazy to me that we're using terms like this. We're conflating terms of peaceful protest and anarchist violence as if they were the same thing. Enforcing laws against one group of people but not another, or so we are told we should do, based on whether or not we agree with their ideological viewpoint. Now tell me about this picture right here.
So what you've got here is the most common laser that we've seen is the green. And, you know, the things you learn doing these jobs, your eye, the human eye, sees the green part of the spectrum more brightly than, say, red, something like 10 times brighter. And also all of this is happening at night. There's peaceful protesting. This is sort of the Portland formula. There's peaceful protesting to 10 or 11 o'clock, and then they go away, and maybe some of them come back, but the group that comes back is A, much bigger, but also they come back for violence.
So when my mom told me nothing good happens after midnight, she wasn't messing around.
Your mother was right, especially about Portland. You also see gasoline in the upper right corner of this picture. We've had accelerants poured into the courthouse while commercial-grade mortar-style fireworks were being shot into the doors in an attempt to light it, also while the side doors, the exits of the building were being blocked, were being barricaded closed. So that was going on as well. And the last picture you see here, it's a little dark to see. They're holding a fire hose that they've hooked up to the courthouse. Now these are our CBP officers because the rioters, not the peaceful protesters, would continuously set fires. They'd throw a ton of trash over a fence, light it on fire, and they would also throw what amounted to homemade hand grenades. There is a video of this picture. This is a snap out of that video where you see two of those explosives coming in. Fortunately, they both explode early, so they don't get so close that they impact these officers. But you can see rather obviously the potential for harm with many of these devices. And this gun here was pulled off of one of the arrested protesters.
While widely available, equipment like this is being used in a somewhat novel way here. I assume this is the kind of thing you don't ordinarily expect to arise spontaneously. In other words, people have given this some thought.
They've given it a great deal of thought, and frankly, there's been evolution of the negative tactics over the course of time. If you look back out of Minneapolis, go back to where George Floyd was killed by that police officer, and then the fight that ensued in the streets of Minneapolis beyond just protesting, many of those violent participants got together and wrote up their lessons learned, sort of an after-action report for criminals. And they've published this, and you see the same thing going on in other parts of the country. Like, we can send you that rather long and extensive, and if you weren't evil, you'd read the quality of the material and you'd say that this is a high quality analysis. And that's on the other side. So that's what we're facing, and it's evolving all the time.
Does the federal government have what some would call general police powers?
No, absolutely not.
How does this differ from general police powers? I've been critical in many instances from federal law enforcement agencies stepping in and engaging in local police function. Tell me why I shouldn't have that concern here.
So all of the DHS officers are cross-designated as Federal Protective Service officers. They're all operating under the Federal Protective Service Authority to protect the courthouse. The marshals have the inside of the courthouse and protect it dutifully. FPS protects the outside. There's also 2 doors down, if you will, another federal building, and in between is the biggest local target of violence, the Multnomah Justice Center. So there's 3 buildings: courthouse, local justice center, federal building, and across the street from all 3 are parks, which have performed the function of staging areas for rioters, for criminals. And the powers being exercised by the federal authorities are to protect the federal facilities. That is it. Even when we go off those properties, which the statute from Congress says we can do, it is for the purpose of performing that function. So if someone assaults a law enforcement officer at the courthouse, we can go arrest that person anywhere in pursuit of that particular authority. But that doesn't mean we can police the streets of Portland and hand out tickets for speeding or doing other things, and that's for Portland and the state police to do.
But for these apparently orchestrated, violent, repeated attacks on federal courthouses and other federal personnel and facilities, would you have ever sent federal personnel into that zone?
Well, of course, the FPS officers are always there, but I assume you mean added more.
Yes.
Through June, FPS continued to add their own officers as the violence escalated. And if you look in May and June, we have a graphic compilation I can send to each of you that shows the number of days of attacks on federal facilities. And in May and June, that total was 12 for both months total. In July, as of July 29th, it was 29. So every single day. The escalation of the targeting of federal facilities led the commander on the scene of the Federal Protective Service to request supplemental Department of Homeland Security officers because they didn't have enough in the region and given their other duties any longer after they had already added their own. That's why pure circumstances on the ground at the request of the local commander, who has always been the regional commander there, and that region is a lively one with Portland and Seattle in the same region. They have some experience here. This has happened, not to this degree, but assaults on federal facilities happened 2 years ago, and the mayor of Portland publicly disclaimed police protection for that facility. And so we have had
Thank
to
you, Mr.
protect ourselves.
Cuccinelli. I'll ask that that document be submitted to the committee, and without objection, it'll be entered into the record.